The powers of scarcity admit to this little community of abundance, it is clear that you are the wave of the future. So before you leave, lay your powerful hands on us and give us energy. The text shows that the power of the future is not in the hands of those who believe in scarcity and monopolize the world's resources. It is in the hands of those who trust the abundance of creation. When the children of Israel are in the wilderness, beyond the reach of Egypt, they still look back and they think, should we really keep going? All the world's glory is in Egypt and with Pharaoh. But when they finally turn around and look into the wilderness, where there are no monopolies, they see the glory of the Creator. In answer to the people's fears and complaints, something extraordinary happens. Love comes trickling down in the form of bread. They say, manhuwe, Hebrew for what is it? And the word manna is born. They had never before received bread as a free gift, and they couldn't control it, predict it, plan for it, or own it. And the meaning of this strange narrative is that the gifts of life are indeed given by a generous Creator. It's a wonder, it's a miracle, it's an embarrassment, it's irrational, but the Creator's abundance transcends the market economy. 3 things happened to this bread there in the 16th chapter of Exodus. First, everybody had enough. But because Israel had learned to believe in scarcity back in Egypt, people started to hoard the bread. When they tried to bank it, to invest it, it turned sour and rotted because you cannot store up the Creator's generosity. Finally, Moses said, you know what we ought to do? We ought to do what God did in Genesis chapter 1. We ought to have a Sabbath. Sabbath means there's enough bread that we don't have to hustle every day of our lives. There's no record that Pharaoh ever took a day off. People who think their lives consist of struggling to get more and more can never slow down because they won't ever have enough. When the people of Israel crossed the Jordan River into the Promised Land, the manna stops coming. Now they can and will have to grow their food. Very soon, Israel suffers a terrible defeat in battle, and Joshua conducts an investigation to find out who or what undermined the war effort. He finally traces their defeat to a man called Achan, who stole some of the spoils of battle and withheld them from the community. Possessing land, property, and wealth makes people covetous, the Bible warns. We who are now the richest nation are today's main coveters. We never feel we have enough. We have to have more, and this insatiable desire destroys us. Whether we are liberal or conservative, we must confess that the central problem of our lives is that we are torn apart by our attraction to the good news of creation's abundance and the power of our belief in scarcity, a belief that makes us greedy and mean and unneighborly. We spend our lives trying to sort out that ambiguity. The conflict between the narratives of abundance and of scarcity is the defining problem confronting us. Just ask the Occupy movement. The story of abundance in Genesis, a story common to the 3 great monotheistic faiths, asserts that we originated in the magnificent, inexplicable love of a Creator who loved the world into generous being. And the story of abundance says that our lives will end in perfect wholeness with creation, and that this well-being cannot be taken from us. In the words of the Apostle Paul, neither life, nor death, nor angels, nor principality, nor things, nothing can separate us from the love of God. What we know about our beginnings and our endings, then, creates a different kind of present tense for us. We can live according to an ethic whereby we are not driven, controlled, anxious, frantic, or greedy, precisely because we are sufficiently at home and at peace to care for others as we have been cared for. I've been watching Nike ads for years now, and the Nike story says that our beginnings are in our achievements, and that we must create ourselves. The young couple down south has a 4-year-old son. Recently, the mother said that she was about to make a crucial decision. She had to get her son into the right kindergarten, because if she didn't, then he wouldn't get into the right prep school. And then that would mean not being able to get into Davidson College. And if he didn't go to school there, he wouldn't be connected to the bankers in Charlotte and be able to get the kind of job where he would make a lot of money. This story is a kind of parable of our notion that we must position ourselves because we must achieve and build our own lives. According to the Nike story, whoever has the most shoes when he dies wins. The Nike story says there are no gifts to be given because there is no giver. We end up only with whatever we manage to get for ourselves. The story ends in despair. It gives us a present tense of anxiety and fear, greed and brutality. It produces child and spousal abuse, indifference to the poor, the buildup of armaments, division between people, and environmental racism. It tells us not to care about anyone but ourselves. And it is the prevailing creed of American society. Wouldn't it be wonderful if liberal and conservative church people who love to quarrel with one another could come to a common realization that the real issue confronting us is whether the news of creation's abundance can be trusted in the face of this story of scarcity? What we know in the secret recesses of our hearts is that the story of scarcity is a tale of death. And we counter this tale by witnessing to the manna. There's a more excellent bread than crass materialism. It's the bread of life, and you don't have to bake it. As we walk into what economists and pundits are calling the new normal, we must decide where our trust is placed. The great question now facing the church is whether we believe in the myth of scarcity or the promise of abundance. If we choose the story of death, we will lose the land to excessive chemical fertilizer, overgrazing, or by pumping out the water table for irrigation, perhaps. If we want to be in on the story of abundance, we have to put away the gods of scarcity. Jesus said it more succinctly: you cannot serve God and mammon. You cannot serve God and do what you please with your money, your sex, or your land. And then he says, don't be anxious because everything you need will be given you, but you must decide. Jesus talks a great deal about the kingdom or realm of God, and what he means by that phrase, kingdom of God, is a public When you hear kingdom of God, think public life reorganized around neighborliness. As a little child, Jesus must have heard his mother Mary singing. And as we know, she sang a revolutionary song, the Magnificat, the anthem of Luke's gospel. You may read for yourself Fred Wooden's adaptation of Mary's song in the back of your hymnal on page 619. Page 619. She sang about neighborliness, about how God brings down the mighty from their thrones and lifts up the lowly, about how God fills the hungry with good things and sends the rich away empty. Mary didn't make up this dangerous song. She took it from another mother, Hannah, who sang it much earlier to little Samuel, who became one of Israel's great revolutionaries. Hannah, Mary, and their little boys imagined a great social transformation. Jesus enacted his mother's song well. Everywhere he went, he broke the vicious cycles of poverty, bondage, fear, and death. He healed, transformed, empowered, and brought new life. Jesus' example gives us the mandate to transform our public life. Telling parables was one of Jesus' revolutionary activities because parables are subversive reimaginings of reality. The ideology devoted to encouraging consumption wants to shrivel our imaginations so that we cannot conceive of living in any way that would be less profitable for the dominant corporate structures. But Jesus tells us that we can change the world. The church performs a vital service by keeping parables alive. These stories haunt us and they push us in directions we never thought we would go.